Ben Duckett does not leave the ball. He goes after everything. That is his signature style. Well, actually, no. Perhaps now he is best known for Duckett's Buckets, his new hat range. I don't know if Herbert Sutcliffe sold his own hats, but I would definitely have bought them if he did. But Ben Duckett does, so you don't need to be left alone without one. Chase down your own Duckett's Buckets today. Welcome to Good Areas Live. I'm Jarrod Kimber. This is the Wagon Wheel, the show where we answer your questions on cricket. Go over to goodareas.co, check out everything we do. We just dropped a big video on Sanju Samson, which I think is quite interesting. Sorry, I helped write that one. And what else was I going to say? A Patreon. You want to support us on Patreon? There's many different ways to support us. There's this new thing on YouTube called Hype, which I don't understand, but you should hype us. You should definitely. Why are you not hyping us right now? If hyping is actually an option on your machine. Yeah, like, subscribe, press the bell icon is a really, really good one to be able to support us. But if you want to do it financially, the best way is via Patreon, or if you're live on this chat, you can also always do a super chat as well. But generally, the Patreon ones are the easiest because we can make a little graphic and we put them on the screen and they look better than the YouTube one. And you don't have to be around at the same time, blah, 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 blah. Anyway. Some people have already done this on Patreon, like James here, who says, would Sam Curran's 45-mile-an-hour slow ball be effective at international level, or is it too slow? It's something that we've seen before. So it's certainly, it's not a one-off attempt at this. I think we've seen variations of this, like Ricky Clark had a version before. Generally what happens is batters come up with a plan against it, and then it loses its effectiveness quite quickly. It's not about whether it's effective at the international level or not. It's just that after a point when people start to see it, it becomes very, very different. So yeah, it's in the situation of this kind of delivery, that's what I'm looking for. How long can he repeat it for? I think Sam Curran is a very, very smart cricketer, and we have seen a few different occasions where he has come up with theories that have worked for a little while, and then people have kind of worked them out, right, and got ahead of them. So it's way too early to know if this is just something that players haven't worked out yet, or if it's something more, right? So maybe one of the best examples of this would be the split finger slow ball, right? That was all the rage for a couple of years. Bowlers were trying it, you know, and then it left. And the reason it left is at a certain point, the slowing the ball down is fine, but the other slower balls actually dip or bounce or spin or, you know, have an extra element to them. Whereas the split finger slow ball was the only one that just kind of, all it did was slow down. And if you could pick the fingers, you could absolutely hammer it. So I don't know where Sam Curran is on this kind of list at the moment, you know, and that's only because it's really, really early on. But if you look at someone like McGrath, it'd be interesting to talk to him about it. My guess is he bowled that split finger slow balls quite a bit for a little while, and then over a period of time just sort of maybe went away from it. Henry Nicholls went off a cliff, but did he fall or was he pushed? So I did a piece on Henry Nicholls, Sam, quite some years ago now, looking at his career, because it was quite fascinating how good he was and then how much he struggled. My memory of it was that a good deal of his struggle was against off spin, and that weirdly enough, and sometimes these things just happen, he didn't face a lot of off spin when he first came in. Or actually maybe he did, but it was part-time off spin. Anyway, it didn't really affect him very much. And then he started to struggle. And if you have a look at his record, I'm just bringing it up now. He's played 33 tests at home and he has 2,000 runs. And he's played 21 tests away from home with 800 runs. So he averages almost 50 at home and half of that away. And I think a lot of his home record came from playing spinners at home and everything. And then when he went on the road and had to start playing them, I think things changed quite dramatically. So in Asia, he averages 25. He also didn't make runs in England either. But I think he's got a good record. So I'm just trying to bring it up. Yeah, he didn't make many runs against South Africa. Obviously, has made a bunch against Zimbabwe of recent times. I don't think he's a bad player. I just don't think he was a very rounded player. And when he got to test level, once that started being discovered, is probably, but once that started being exposed, he probably had to go off and work on it again. I still think he's got international batting quality, but whether he has the rounded game to be able to do that, we don't know. Josh says, how well would McGrath have done in a third seamer role like Garner, Cummins, Wagner? I would imagine many new ball all-timers might struggle in this role despite their greatness. Yeah, I don't think McGrath would have struggled all that much. I think you could actually, despite him being maybe one of the greatest new ball bowlers of all time, I think you could argue that he's probably, when he was coming through, Australia probably thought of him as a first change bowler, right? Like, hit the wicket, slow the run scoring down a little bit, very accurate. I'm trying to remember. I don't think he started opening the bowling until all the injuries came in. And my memory was that I remember commentators even suggesting that maybe that would be, because no one could really work out what to do with him. You know, he wasn't like an uber fast bowler, but he wasn't particularly slow either. Just having a look here. Yeah, so he was bowling first change on and off. So he did open the bowling a little bit too. But he certainly bowled first change in South Africa in 94. And then he was still doing it in the West Indies until those injuries. So there's a fair bit of time where he not a fair bit, like 5 or 6 test matches probably, where he wasn't automatically taking the new ball. And so because he was an outswing bowler, there was actually a chance of that. It was just that Merv had gone, McDermott got injured, Fleming get injured as well. And so suddenly the bowling stocks had to change. I think it was him and Rifle, perhaps, who sort of took over at that point. And I think he would have been a really good first change bowler. I don't know if he would have had, I think his record would have been better than Wagner's. It would have maybe been around Cummins' record, I would have thought. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. I don't know how many over by over splits we have of him. You'd have to do a big one. But he's a very different kind of first change bowler than Garner. But you couldn't really score off him at his peak, right? And his ability to get the ball to move later into the innings than other people was still part of his skill set. But it's weird if you take off the brand new ball, because he might have been the best brand new ball bowler of all time. Sam says, listening to Pujara this summer was a real treat as he improved session on session. Which commentator has had a similarly rapid development at the start of their career? I thought Shane Watson was one for me who, I don't even know if, I just thought Shane Watson was really good from a very early position and sort of understood what he had to do. I think I talked about this on Kamapa, Sam, of, Pujara was, I think I had like 2 conversations with him this summer, and one of them was about commentary, and he was talking about how he was, trying to understand and get feedback, learn. Generally, that's the guys who get better, and the guys who just think it's an easy job or a job that you don't have to do much for are the ones who struggle. And you would have to say that someone like Brett Lee over a long period of time has really improved. It's something that you can get a lot better at if you get proper feedback and you do it a lot and everything else. But yeah, I didn't listen to Pujara directly, so I don't have many notes on him. Oh, Rishi. Many venues like Dubai and Abu Dhabi during the ICC Men's T20 World Cup have shown that you can turn the ball into a slippery bar of soap in the second innings. Chasing teams won. Yeah, we all know about that World Cup where chasing teams won a lot. From a cricketing perspective, what steps have the ICC or franchise tournaments taken to counter Drew's impact? Well, the IPL's brought in a regulation, haven't they, that the balls can be changed in the second innings. Is it just second innings? It might be both innings, actually, which is probably one of the best options. I think we maybe have to get to a point of... I think we might have to get to a point where let's say we have a new ball for the first 10 overs, and then we have a 5 over old ball for 10 to 15 and 15 to 20, because we have seen situations where the ball's been hit out the ground, it's been replaced, and the game changes massively. I think that's one way of doing it. I don't think there's really a way of changing it. That tournament was a bit of a fluke, and I think people remember it because it was a World Cup. It's not always the case. Was it the Women's World Cup that was played in the exact same situation that went in a completely different pattern? We kept waiting for the dew, and it didn't really happen as much. So yeah, I think I think that's a big part. On the betting side, how stark are the numbers? Betting markets often don't fully price in the chasing advantage post toss in dew heavy conditions. I think they're pretty good at it. I mean, there are certainly people that have an edge, Rishi, in those markets. I've got some friends who have an edge, but generally, if a ground is known for being dew, if you look at the betting market, it will favor the toss can massively change the impact there. So yeah, I would actually say that there is a value to that. So most bookies or people who set odds around the world would have some sort of information on this. Obviously, punters, those really big syndicates are usually a step ahead of the booking bookmakers and the markets in general. But no, I would say it's factored in quite a bit. I think because you look at that and you go 21 out of 27 matches in that tournament, right? If that was the case, then we wouldn't even watch T20 cricket if that was the case everywhere. If that was the case consistently in these tournaments, we wouldn't be watching these tournaments at all. So it's not the case. So it's still, I haven't looked at the recent numbers, but it's what, 55%, 58%, probably a little bit higher than what you would want, but it's not 100%. Also, sometimes dew helps the bowling side. Not all dew helps the batting side. Sometimes the ball just starts behaving differently off the wicket. Sometimes it starts sliding on a little bit and it becomes really hard to play. So I think dew is seen as this one-dimensional thing, and it's not. Also, there are grounds that are massively famous for dew where dew just doesn't come in. Sometimes dew comes in the first innings, right? Or at the change of innings, and it doesn't affect the game at all. So I think it's a far more complicated thing than maybe the average fan would know. And I'm getting a lot of this information from the people who are betting on it. Levin says, is Steve Smith the most improved player of the 2010s? You didn't think he'd bat in the top 7, and he's now arguably a top 5 all-time batter. Yeah, I don't know if I would say he's improved. I think we were wrong, to say he couldn't bat in the top 7. And it wasn't just me. It was like almost everyone who commentated on him. It was his captain, Ricky Ponting, right? Ricky Ponting said he's not a top 6 batter. And that was after he made runs against Pakistan at Headingley. So, yeah, I think the cricket community was very wrong about that technique. It was such an outlier that I think I'm okay with that. I think it's probably changed the way that I look for things now and the way that I sort of trust information and everything. The same way that if Zach Crawley started averaging 50, right, I would have to probably change the way I think about things as well. That's how you should do things. You come up with models and methods and plans and systems, and then you should be able to shake them up when outliers come in. So I don't think Smith was an improved player. If you go back to, I think it was Steve Waugh. Steve Waugh, obviously Trent Woodhill. There's a couple of other guys in Sydney who are like, no, you guys are all wrong. This guy's the next big thing. So it's not that he was improved. It's that we didn't think his method would translate. And it did. And it translated pretty similar to what his first class numbers were. Then there's a marginal improvement, I think. Best player to improve in the 2010s, it's got to be Ishant Sharma, right? Would anyone not agree with that? I'd be pretty high up on my list. Yeah. Mob King says, the god of sports trades visits you one night, granting you the power to make one single trade in the IPL. As a fan of trades and IPL cricket, what's the one trade play you'd make? I like a good multi-trade. So I suppose I'd be looking at, I'd want 2 stars to move. I'd want one team to completely rejig their style. And I'd want another team to go all in on young talent. But I don't know if there's like a specific one there, Mob, right? Like I'm trying to think. Obviously, right at the moment, you'd just do Sanju Samson, wouldn't it? And now Ashwin's retired. Any trade talk about him has sort of disappeared. But yeah, you would do Sanju Samson. I'm trying to think who else that you want to move around. some of the other players. Yeah, I can't think of like the full trade off the top of my head. But if I was doing the NBA, this is why I need a trade calculator, which I wish we kind of also had in cricket. Although I don't know if the wages make it possible. Reese says in all out cricket, it's not all out cricket. What's it called? The art of batting. You talk about watching the ball and how it becomes harder the quicker it gets. I feel that the discourse on why you should watch the ball is often left out of cricket coaching at lower levels. Is this something you see? The reason I ask is too many kids become too focused on this and not the reasons why, such as getting your head closer to the ball or your feet. I feel that the discourse on why you should watch the ball is often left out. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I've been coaching under 7s through to under 13s of recent times, maybe a little bit in under 15s as well. I think the first thing that you have to do with the vast majority of younger cricketers is just that encouragement. And so I'm very specific with what I'm saying to the kids. I'm saying, where are your eyes? And I want them to consciously look at the ball. So when I do it with my little girl who's 5, she'll be like, right? Like she really but that's what I want her to do so that it becomes a subconscious thing. And also so that if a kid is having trouble when they are 11, 12, 13, when they start to do it more subconsciously, I'll be like, where are you looking as the ball's coming out? And so I can actually watch their eyes and have a look at it. You can't hit something that you're not watching, right? So even when you're talking about the top players in the world, what they are doing really is they are watching the flight to give them a clue, and then they're moving their eyes forward. So everyone is doing that. I think that I am much more focused on that than I am on technique. So one of my son's coaches is really big on the big forward press. And I was like, I don't think that suits his natural athleticism. I think he's quite a tall, a player who will overbalance if he goes forward. Whereas one of the other kids at the club needs that. So as long as they're both looking, then we can tweak the individual techniques that suit their best shots, their best game, how they hold the bat, and everything else. So I just think it's really important from a very young age that the kids know that that's what they should be doing. So I think what we say is watch the ball. And I think what I have learned over time is, where are you looking to change that? I hope that answers your question there, Reese. Let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, there will be more of the wagon wheel and good areas and all these sorts of things. There'll be more of everything. More things. I have traveled the cricketing world, and so I've collected 2 things: the phone numbers of random taxi drivers and overseas SIM cards. Rideshare apps have fixed the first part, and Sally is doing the second. Now, all you need is their eSIM on whatever plan works for you. You activate it, and you can use it anywhere in the cricketing world. It helps you save money. It is a global solution to a global problem. Stop fiddling with tiny SIMs and get the one that does it all. Go to Sally.com good areas and use the code good areas to get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. Fly free with Sally. All right, welcome back here. Neil says, from what I understand, Rajasthan Royals have been pretty big on using data analytics. I know it's not a silver bullet, but why do you think it hasn't helped their fortunes over the years? We actually did a podcast, Neil, with Manoj a while back now, actually. God, it's like a lifetime ago. Was that even before COVID? It was a long time ago. It might have been towards the start of the podcast. I know it was after Neil Wagner, but yeah, it was a long time back. And he basically admitted that they haven't always been completely on the ball. I think they saw Rajasthan Royals as an investment and still see it as an investment. And so I think they've made a lot of mistakes over that time that they would probably be quite honest with. I still think now they're making some mistakes. Of recent times, they seem to be sort of hopping between legends as coaches, rather than coming up with a plan. So look, I haven't worked with them for, I haven't ever worked with them, but I haven't really chatted with Manoj for a while, but it'd be interesting to get his take. But I still think they have a very small team mentality. And so they came up with a theory which was 5 frontline bowlers and Ashwin as the swing batter. But their batters didn't quite match up to their bowlers. And so they had this very good bowling attack if you go back. What was that? Was it Trent Bolt? I'm trying to think who some of their other bowlers were. Ashwin, Chahal. There was another good seamer as well. Like they had some good bowlers there, but the batting probably didn't quite do it. So you can have all the analytics in the world. You still have to, and you've come up with a theory, and I think the theory was solid enough. Like I could understand it. We had seen other international teams do similar things. Some franchise teams do similar things. But if you don't pull it off, right, at the auction, it doesn't really matter. And I think Robbie said something recently about that, all this, we're 17 years in, and no teams have really worked out the auction. Whereas if you go to, something like a basketball or a baseball, you've got someone like OKC who almost always seem to draft the right players, right? That's much harder to do in the auction because the auction has a sense of randomness to it, which might cause some issues. But I honestly do think that there is and remains a bit of a small team bias, a small team thinking with Rajasthan at times, where they're maybe not as aggressive in trying to win as some of the other sides are. They do a lot of good things. I still think they could do a lot better than they do. And I also think that you can have... I've never worked for them, right? So, but from outside and from people who have worked for them, I get the feeling that they have a lot of people that are hired to do a lot of smart things, but they trust a couple of people in really key decisions who maybe don't really believe in the data. And so if you don't have your decision makers believing in the data, you can have all the best data in the world, it doesn't go anywhere. So all those things might play a part. Cam says, venues for the Women's World Cup changed at the last minute. Again for a World Cup in India, and tickets are not on sale or possible to purchase, having tried from outside of India at least. How do they still get away with this? It's pathetic. The ICC should be ashamed of themselves. This keeps happening. We are a sport that absolutely does not look after our fans. And you could argue that we've never looked after our fans. And that's just the sad reality of it. I see so much bullshit said by cricket boards about trying to find new markets and everything. And I'm like, what about fixing the facilities in the grounds? What about making sure that you can go to the toilet and come back, right? Without missing 5 overs of a game. What about making sure that there is water and clean toilets and you don't have to queue up forever? There's so much that is done poorly at cricket grounds. I just don't understand it. And then you get these World Cups. I'm supposed to be working on this. I was supposed to be traveling. I'm not sure I still am, but I was hoping to go out. We can't plan anything. And not only that, I had inside information that this was going to happen. So when I was about to plan it, someone said, don't plan anything yet. That's dreadful. It wasn't like this was a last minute. Everyone that I talked to within cricket had said it will probably change. What are we doing? And then if no one's there, people will say, oh, look, people don't support women's cricket or people don't support these smaller countries. How can you even buy a ticket to go over there? It's really unprofessional. Cricket's just got to get better. Lemon said, would the quality of cricket actually decrease if we simply allow ball tampering? We do allow ball tampering, Lemon. It is absolutely allowed all the time. People are tampering with the ball. I would go as far to say, Lemon, that you've never watched a cricket game since the year 2000 that hasn't involved ball tampering. Here's my test for you. Go watch a cricket game, whether it be on TV or at the ground. Have a look how often big, strong fielders can't throw the ball in on the full from the boundary. Even as the boundaries get smaller, even as the athletes get bigger. It's weird. It always hits the rough bit of the wicket. So fascinating. We could stop ball tampering in a minute if we wanted to. We just have to have a camera on the ball all the way around. There are still some things you could do. but it's also something that's always gone on. So I don't know how to answer your question because ball tampering has been around for 150 years and no one seems to really want to fix it, and it will continue. Nadika says, in what order would you rank these three batters? Samarawira, Angelo Matthews, and Karunaratne. I mean, when you're asking me something like that, I'd have to do a very big look. I know I wrote about Samarawira a lot in the art of batting, and the other two weren't really in it. I was a big fan of Matthews. I don't think he quite came on the way that I was hoping he would. I think he probably got a little bit stuck, and I think there were some other issues with him, and maybe never quite became the batter that I still thought he could have become. Karunaratne, it's a great opener in his era, but I think a lot of his runs still come. Let me just have a look. I know I was looking this up because we did a video on him, didn't we? Look, as a player, I had so much respect for him, but I think if you do break down his record, where are we? Yeah, averages 45 in Asia and doesn't average above 35 in any other continent. I think you have to be pretty honest there that he was brilliant at what he did in Asia, and it didn't quite translate for him away from home. I think he averages around about low 30s away from home. I hate that we have neutral tests in that as well. Cricinfo should just have home, away, neutral, and away from home, but we don't do that. So yeah, I would probably have them ranked in the order that you've got them there. I mean, if I did a deeper dive on Matthews' career, maybe I could come up with something slightly different there, based on him batting at 5 in an era when it was good to bat at 5, compared to Matthews. Compared to Karunaratne having to open an era where it was tough to open. But I think Samarawira should be the best of those three. Again, a very one-dimensional player. But when you're asking stuff like that, it would take me so long to go through and really come up with it. Sam says, love the Neil Wagner interview. It made me wonder if you're aware of many other neurodivergent figures in cricket and whether you have any thoughts on neurodivergence has impacted their approach to the game. Yeah, I mean, I'm very late learning about neurodivergence, other than, I suppose, living it and not being diagnosed. So you can put that in whichever way that you want to put it in. But I understood it, I suppose, intrinsically because I lived it, but I didn't know about it medically or professionally or anything like that. I learned a lot about ADHD through Benny Howe. So I don't know if I broke the Benny Howe ADHD story, or it was certainly the first time he came on record and he talked about it. So I did a big interview with him, and I think it opened up a lot of cricketers to talk about it a little bit more. But he discussed how he's always got a cricket ball in his hand and he's always flicking it, and that's how a lot of the slow balls come from, that sort of force to be creative, to be active, and everything else. But he also talked about the negative sides of ADHD and how they held him back. I talked to Mitchell Johnson about his ADHD, also on a Red Inker. He has, I think it probably did hold him back a little bit, but it probably helped him hyper-focus at times as well. But he would often hyper-focus on the wrong things. It's actually, Sam, it's a really good interview if you go back, because I brought up some things that had always interested me about Mitchell Johnson in his career. And now you suddenly have the chance to talk to him about them. I thought that was quite fascinating. But yeah, I think having spent a lot of time around athletes, I think there's a lot of neurodivergence about athletes, and I think there kind of has to be. I always had this theory that the best sports writers quite often had were on some sort of a spectrum. And the reason is it allowed you to go beyond. Like, sometimes I'll see very good sports journalists, but I know that they're never going to knock my socks off with research or analysis or the amount of people they interview, right? Because they're going to always cap it at what is acceptable, right? Of like, I can't go off and do this. Whereas, some other sports writers are like, their superpower comes from the fact that they probably go beyond society. They don't need to do as much research as they did for that piece. And it goes on to be an epic piece. And I don't want to out any of my sports writing friends, but I think there's an element of, like, at the elite level of any industry, I spent times with, billionaires and, top politicians and top writers and, actors and comedians and everything. There is, I think, that sort of single-minded mentality that comes with neurodivergence sometimes. I think the ability to see things differently to everyone else, hyper-focus, whatever you want to, all these different things that come from it can really help you. They also really hold you back. Betting House career could have been over. And ADHD played a part in why it could have been over, right? My neurodivergence has probably held me back at times, whereas at other times it's been an incredible superpower. So it goes both ways. I think it's not like there's a particular kind of autism or ADHD or dyslexia or whatever the other neurodivergent scales are that is like going to make you great, because everything else plays a part. But it's really interesting talking to these people as they open up about it, right? As they start to say, yeah, no, this was a thing. And, until I was diagnosed with dyslexia, I didn't know that it was a form of neurodivergence. And so I remember now listening back to older athletes talking about that. And it's like, it makes sense why they ended up being pushed towards sport, because that was the thing that they could see the code of. Whereas in reading or verbally or whatever it might have been, they couldn't see the code. And so I think, it can go in multiple different directions when it comes to all that sort of stuff. Let's have a quick break here. And then when we come back, there'll be more of Wagon Wheel. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now. Watch every match with Nord. Head to nordvpn.com/good areas to get a discount on VPN. Play safe with Nord. Mob says, Aaron Finch has said at T20, one ball could change the game. It's about taking the emotion out of it. And yet, when the first ball of the match pitched is a no ball, it can have rippling effects on the game. Can you please talk about what goes through heads of players? Yeah, it depends on the player. We see a lot of bowlers start with the first ball wide, and it doesn't bother them at all, right? So every player is different, and some players. This is something Curran Pollard taught me. It was him, and I forget the name of that. We had a sports psychologist who was assistant coach at St. Lucia, and they're both talking about this, and Brad Hodge as well. Sort of, they were taking me through basically what you want is you want someone who's really emotional and passionate, because those sort of people try harder and care more, and all these sorts of things. But you also want them to get to a point where they don't feel every high and feel every low. So you might get Trent Bolt might come in and bowl a no ball first ball or a wide first ball, and he's just like, okay, so now what do I need to do? You might get other fielders in the field being like, oh my God, Trent Bolt's bowled a no ball. So you actually want your players to understand that worst case scenario can happen, and that it's no different than anything else. You still have to work your way through the problem. And so players who aren't at that level emotionally, they're going to be affected by that. Now, they may not even be the person who's bowled that ball, right? But they're going to be affected by it a little bit. Whereas Trent Bolt's going to go back and go, okay, so I can't bowl knee length on middle stump, which was my plan to this batter. I probably need a wide Yorker here. Oh, well, but I can't move the field. So I've got the field set this way. Okay, so maybe if I try a slow ball on the pads with the field out the way that it is, if he does clip it, there's a chance it's not going to go for 4 or 6, right? You need your player to be like that, to be able to think through the problem and go through it, and the captain to be in the same case. The teams who don't have that emotional maturity, don't have that professional mindset, they're the ones who are going to be affected by this. There's nothing you can do about that, because players get to this level. It's very rare to have this at 20, right? And there aren't that many 32, 33-year-olds who don't have an element of this. It's just the level of being a professional, being, and coming on board and understanding all those sorts of things. So very, very normal, I think, is the way to look at that. But remember that, the player that you're looking at, the players that you're looking at, some of those players might have been in that situation 50 times in their life by that point. So there are going to be players who do not have any impact, and there are going to be players who are like, oh God, we're gone. That's the role of leadership, of everything else, to make them feel like, no, it's one ball. We can pull it back. Reese says, I've seen your comments about Jamie Smith's inability to play the outswinger off Siraj or in general. Do you think there are other times in cricket history where a moment showed how cyclical cricket was and how bowling and batting techniques go in and out in fashion? I just think it's all happening so much quicker, Reese, now that I think you'd have to be. I think it's fascinating that there are so many batters in the world that you can bowl wide of the crease. Wide of the stumps to, and suddenly have an issue. Whereas the entire generation before, that's all they wanted, right? And then suddenly everyone, it's changed their techniques and changed their trigger movements and also the shots that they play. And so I think there are probably moments where like maybe did pinch hitting go away slightly because fast bowlers were willing to bowl slow balls earlier on, right? You know, if you're bowling at 135, 135, a tail ender can kind of line that up. But if you're bowling at 135 and 120 and 135 and 120, if they're not picking it the same way that a top order player would be, if they don't know how to pause at the top of their backswing, or you know, all those different things that you have to do when you're facing a slow ball like that, where does that go, right? So I think there are probably many moments like this before, Reese. I just think the difference now is that we are seeing them back to back. So we basically have seen the Shane Watson, Kevin Peterson sort of LBW conundrum from DRS and DRS related types of things. That affected a lot of players, and a lot of which, like, it's easy to say it for Watson and for KP, but how much did it affect other players, right? That weren't as good as them, and maybe never even got to be that good. Then you've got the whole Virat Kohli, Marnus Labuschagne, Babar Azam, who the wobble ball didn't affect them. The wobble ball second iteration affected them, right? But then you've got the play, and I can't remember them all because there were so many of them. But there's a whole, it was like, what, 17 out of 25 players, their batting average went down after the wobble ball became popular. So that's 3 in a row, right? That we've had back to back to back. We've never had the ability to do that because information hasn't traveled as quickly and bowlers can't understand things. And these, so I'm sure there are multiple occasions of this. I think we tried to find some historic ones. I'm working on a piece at the moment. I'm trying to remember, Reese, if I actually came up with one or not. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. But yeah, it's not. It is dynamic at the moment, and so it's really noticeable when something happens, and you can suddenly go, "Oh, okay." So they're just going to bowl wide to Jaiswal and maybe a little bit short, and they think he will eventually go out, and they're willing to take that. And you know, and teams are being able to pick this up a lot quicker than ever before. Whereas maybe that would have taken years, and then maybe one team would have disagreed with it. Whereas now it's all on video, and so I think it is changing really quickly. PJ says, is it just me, or does it feel like Adam Zampa doesn't get enough respect as a white ball bowler? He's taken over 300 white ball wickets for Australia on top of an outstanding franchise career. Goes at under 7.5 in all T20 cricket. It feels like he wouldn't be near the top of anyone's draft list in hypothetical global T20 draft. Yeah, he's not mysterious, is he? He goes through patches of being absolutely brilliant and probably goes through patches of not being as consistent. Whereas perhaps all the other greater wrist spinners have. If you want the basic answer to this, PJ, it's probably because he doesn't spin the ball all that much. There's probably a little bit of Anil Kumble here, right? Like, of if he spun the ball more, or he was more openly mysterious, right? Because kind of from your wrist spinner, what you want is either lots of turn, or you want Shane Warne or Mushtaq Ahmed, right? Like, you want lots of mystery or lots of turn. And Zampa's probably not one of those. So he's probably more straightforward. He's quite a skiddy bowler, and a lot of his wickets come from skidding the ball on. Again, that's not as much fun as, some other leg spinners that we've... It's not as much fun as Adil Rashid, is it? To watch him. I think Adam Zampa has had a very comparable career to Adil Rashid. But as a leg spinner, sorry, Zamps, but as a leg spinner, I think Adil Rashid is sexier, right? It's a big loop and it's the drop and, the dramatic wrong-uns and the extra bounce and everything. Whereas a lot of things that Zampa does is it's more tight and focused and, as I said, about skidding the ball on at times as well and other things. So I just think that sometimes you're just not sexy. And, that's what comes down to it. And I think a lot of Zampa's career has been that. There's probably just a plethora of, wrist spinners from Afghanistan, even Nepal, who have popped up and have got a lot of those low-end contract gigs and Zampa's probably priced himself out of that a little bit, rightfully, because he is, as you say, 300 international wickets. And so you can probably find a leg spinner on the market. I remember we had a plan weirdly at St. Lucia again of like, can we just get 3 leg spinners in and one who can bat? This is before Hasaranga. So I think we're looking at Shadab Khan. So if we could get Shadab Khan, KS Ahmed, and probably a left arm wrist spinner in, can we afford that? Will that ruin the flow of our team? Well, no, KS can bat a little bit. Shadab can bat, up the order. The other one can even be a specialist. And I think Salim Keel was probably the one who was on my list at that stage. If we have those 3, how much does that take out of our budget? And it's like, it doesn't actually take that much, right? And that gives us incredible flexibility all the way through the innings and everything else. So why would you spend, and Zampa was playing, I think, for Guyana that year, why would you spend a lot more money on someone like Zampa, who can't bat, and isn't a particularly a plus fielder? He's not a bad fielder, but he's not a plus fielder. So there are probably a few different ways that Zampa falls through the cracks, I would say, is on that. Also, there's absolutely no doubt of this. I don't think it's a good career move to be a Western wrist spinner. Much better off to be an Asian wrist spinner, just because there is much more trust in that. I'm talking about Asian and non-Asian markets. I just think that there is more trust in that. It's much harder to sort of break through. There's a cricketer that me and Robbie always talk about on Kimappa, which is George Linder, where we're like, he surely should be playing a lot more high-level cricket here. And he probably would have been, right? If he came from an Asian nation, or he was, or if he was Asian. There is an element of, does he know spin? And, American football is full of this, if you go through. And it's fascinating. It's the same with, you're much more likely to pick a tearaway fast bowler from South Africa, right, than you probably are from New Zealand. There's just a history of tearaway fast bowlers from South Africa or Pakistan, and there isn't from New Zealand. So I do think that sometimes plays a part as well. But I just think ultimately he's just a little bit unsexy. Sinoi says, when making team at the tournament or team of the series, commentators, pundits often pick players out of their position, arguing that a player would do so well there too. Do you think players should only be picked for a position that they actually dominated during the series? It's really important, Sinoi, that I don't give a shit. Because this is one of those things where fans spend more time worrying about these teams than the people who vote the players in. My friends have done this. I've seen the lack of research that they do. There's a really good piece that me and Sid Mongo wrote together, 2019 World Cup, where we came up with our team and we tackled this issue. It's a fascinating one, right? If you have 2 great number 4s and you don't have a great number 5, do you go with the lesser number 5 because that's a specialty spot when you actually know the number 4 could bat at number 5, right? I think where it gets tricky is sometimes you end up with the team of the year and it's like someone who hasn't opened is opening. That feels a little bit more icky at times, doesn't it, right? But I don't think there's one answer to this. I just think that you're trying to come up with the best team at any situation. And I think that 2019 team, we might have had Curran in, or maybe we had him on the fringes of that side, because we thought he was playing a role that other guys who were really good at batting maybe weren't fulfilling. Whereas if, I'm trying to think of who was batting at number 4 in that tournament, but would Root have been at number 4? Let's say Root. It's like, well, Root and Curran are doing 2 completely different things. Whereas if it was another player, if it was Angelo Matthews, maybe you'd be like, well, Root could do the same thing that Angelo Matthews was doing, right? I'm just making up names here, but I think you could make that argument there. But yeah, there is no one right answer for that. I mean, if you were picking the greatest team of all time, right, or greatest 11 of all time, Sinoi, you would probably at number 5 would not be a specialist number 5 batter. It would probably be a number 3 or number 4 who you couldn't fit up the order. So let's just do it off the top of our heads, right? So you've got your 2 openers. You've got Bradman at 3. You've got Sachin at 4. At number 5, you're not going to pick Shiv Narayan Chandrapal, Clive Lloyd, or Steve Waugh, are you? Right? You now have the ability. So who's a batter from the top order that could slip into number 5? It's probably Lara, right? Yeah, because it wouldn't be Hobbs would be opening, Hartman would be opening in that situation. Yeah, so it's probably Lara. The best number 5 ever is AB de Villiers or Chandrapal or Steve Waugh or Clive Lloyd or whatever, whoever you want of that group. We did a video on that. As good as all those players are, wouldn't you just pick Lara ahead of them, right? Or is there anything in Viv Richards' game that suggests he couldn't bat at number 5? Pretty good record against spin. Don't think you want to bowl to him with an old ball. So I do think that you have to be a little bit realistic with that, because when you're picking a team of the year, you don't want a bunch of role players in it. Team of the tournament. You don't want a bunch of role players. You also don't want to penalize the role players if they're doing something that. So you don't want, let's say you can't fit Kane Williamson in your team of a tournament. I'm going back to 2019. I can't, but let's say you can't fit him in because there's another better number 3, right? You can't bat him at 5 or 6 because he's probably not going to be suited to 5 or 6, right? Whereas maybe you could make an argument that Rohit Sharma could do that. So I think that's a fair thing. But as long as you're finding a player who can do that role, the reason that you would, otherwise I think there's just a natural sort of element of you don't have your team as strong as it should be, so you can justify that. And I'm all for role players, so I don't mind it. Adityaran says, in the book, you talk about where the batters look when the bowler runs in as the ball's being bowled. It is much less complicated for bowlers, but do you know where bowlers typically look as they're running in as they try and launch? So the 2 things that I've heard are the stump that you want to be aiming at, or the part of the, so just outside the stumps that you want to be aiming at, or the part of the pitch that you want to hit. I think that's pretty much it. I haven't signed a deal for the bowling book yet, so we haven't really started doing it, but that's something that I really want to talk to with a lot of bowlers to see if there is a difference. If you go back to the Neil Wagner interview, he starts to talk about specifically exactly when he's running in, where he's trying to hit the batter. That is not something I've heard all that much about before. I do know I can't remember who it was, but I remember talking to a bowler once who said to me that when he was bowling for LBWs, he'd like to look at the pads. Especially in his mind, it was because he was waiting for the batter to trigger. So when they triggered, he's like, great, that's where they're going to be. So now this is where I need to bowl. Sam says, how much ball tampering is there in modern professional cricket? Assuming that there's a decent amount, what are the common techniques and to what extent is tampering tacitly accepted by the umpires? So I mentioned this before, of course. Every game has ball tampering. I'd be shocked if you guys are watching any professional games where the ball is not tampered. Throwing it into the ground, occasionally standing on it, letting it roll for long periods of time. There isn't as much seam picking as the old days. So the umpires have definitely gone back on that. I was talking to some old cricketers once and they said that you would get the ball and like the seams would just be like opened wide like a wound. That doesn't happen as much just because umpires are a little bit like, guys, because that's not something that happens naturally, right? Like if the whole seam is being chipped up away, like, whereas the ball getting old does happen naturally. The thing that the umpires used to do, Sam, was they used to hold the ball up like this amongst themselves, and that was their way of saying this has been tampered with. but yeah, it's mostly throwing it into the ground, little bits of scratching. The best way of of doing it is to pretend like you're, I don't know if I can do this on the video. I might have to stand up. Sorry to everyone on the audio podcast, but I've explained this before, but I'll do it on my t-shirt. So if you hold the ball like you're going to be polishing it, but if you can see at the moment, what you can't see if you're looking at me from that direction, from straight on, is where my thumb is. And my thumb is actually just there, and it is scratching the ball, right? So if you look at it from that direction, you can see it. But if I dig it in, it's really hard to see. That's really common. Incredibly common. It's a hard skill to master, and you've got to be careful and everything else. And but certainly that is. Then you've got zippers, all sorts of things. But yeah, it's pretty. I don't want to say there. 97% of international men's cricketers can throw the ball back in on the full from any boundary in world cricket, and they don't. So it's accepted. What's not accepted is of obviously bringing a bottle top on, sandpaper, these sorts of more extreme things. But it's pretty accepted all the way through. And players laugh at it off camera, but they don't want to be seen talking about it particularly on camera. So it's a bit of a weird one in that. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, more Wagon Wheel.
Ross Taylor couldn't see at night or when the clouds were in. Eventually, he had to see an eye specialist who would fix his eyesight. In the 2 years before the change, he still averaged more than 50 in international cricket. The top level of batting talent can basically see in the dark. That is who we are talking about in our new book, The Art of Batting. Head over and order your copy today.
Josh says, on a Crick Picks all-time red ball all-rounder squad, the trio picked 18 names and mentioned several others with no mention of Basil D'Oliveira. Is this a fireable offence? No, I don't think he shouldn't be in the top 18 best all-rounders of all time. His bowling was really very first-classy. England went into a game once where they made him their fourth bowler. And it was actually the test match he got dropped after. And even though he'd made runs and shouldn't have been dropped, blah, blah, blah. But part of the reason was his bowling just wasn't up to it. So he averaged 39.55 with the ball, took a wicket a game, very much a stock bowler. You wouldn't put him on the list. I'd have to have a look at who the 18th best all-rounder is. But I wouldn't have thought that he is naturally in that list. Having watched him bowl a little bit and obviously done a lot of research on him, I don't think his bowling's better than Steve Waugh's, right? So Steve Waugh would have taken a lot more wickets if it wasn't for his hamstrings, right? So Steve Waugh averages about a wicket a game at an average of about 36, 37. So slightly better than Basil from that point of view, and was, I think, a more incisive bowler. I'm just having a look at Hansi Cronje. So Hansi Cronje, 68 matches, 43 wickets at 29. I would say both of them are probably better bowlers than Basil D'Oliveira, and D'Oliveira was a better bat than Hansi, but in the period of Test cricket we had, they're probably fairly comparable to each other. Whereas obviously Steve Waugh's on another level. So I wouldn't have put Steve Waugh in the best 18 all-rounders or Hansi Cronje in the best 18 all-rounders. I would say that level of all-rounder is probably where you find Basil D'Oliveira. I think that's probably about his level of what, like his bowling, like Shane Warne's level of batting, maybe. It doesn't, Anil Kumble's level of batting, like it helps, but they're not all rounders. Basil's probably, because he can hold it a little bit more, because his economy was under 2 and over. Maybe, and we just did the big video on all rounders. I think maybe you could pull it back towards he's maybe slightly more used than those two guys and their batting is. But yeah, I think also, I'm just trying to remember. I should remember all this off the top of my head, but I don't know if he's bowling. Where's his bowling? So in England, he averaged 32, and yet everywhere else, it's 48 and above. So they didn't even really use him that much when he wasn't in England. So he played, 16 test matches away from the UK and took 9 wickets. So in the UK, he was very handy. And, you know, Mark Elam type. I don't know how old you are, Josh. Like better than Paul Collingwood or Jonathan Trott. Not as good as Colin de Grandhomme. Like, you know, that kind of nagging medium pace. You really have to be in England or New Zealand to almost bowl him, right? Like, he's just not particularly useful anywhere else. Neil says, origin of reverse swing. Do you know who, what, when, where, and why? Yeah, it's actually in my test cricket book. We'll be writing about it again for the art of batting as well, art of bowling, if we get around to that book as well. So reverse swing had existed in the West Indies and Australia were 2 places where they had seen it before. So specifically Victoria, I can't remember which islands it was. Is it Trinidad? It might have been Trinidad and Guyana, where it had happened kind of naturally and accidentally. So in Victoria, they thought they could work it out, but they couldn't make it happen consistently. And the West Indians knew it happened, but again, didn't know how they were doing it. What happens then is Sarfaraz Nawaz, and there's another guy, I'd have to check his name, Neil, but there was a guy who only played a little bit of first-class cricket in Pakistan who did work it out. And so no one's quite sure if they worked it out together in tandem or if it was individual. But Sarfaraz Nawaz definitely works out that roughing up one side of the ball is what allows for this to happen. And then throughout the 70s, we still occasionally get teams like Victoria who believe that they can occasionally get it done, but it's not consistent. The Australian team doesn't really pick it up. And then in the late 70s, obviously, Sarfaraz Nawaz has the great spell at the MCG, which he says is not reverse swing, even though the ball was like 35 overs old or something. If you go back and have a look at it, Neil, I take 7 for 1 in that spell. 9 for, yeah. 7 for 1, 7 for 2, I can't remember. In that spell, took a 9 for in the MCG, and it looks like reverse swing. And the players are playing it like it's reverse swing, even if they don't know what it is. And he suddenly goes through Australia. And then by the early 80s, obviously, Imran is also bowling it. Some of the other Pakistani seamers are bowling it. It takes a little bit longer to get sort of out of that. The West Indies don't really look at it as a valid option. By the 90s, I think you have the Indian bowlers are doing it as well by the early 90s. And so it's mostly a little bit of India, but India just doesn't have the caliber of bowlers, you know, Zampa and Wagon to be able to do it. But it's certainly happening there. You see the Australians start to do it by the late 90s, and then I think most other countries start to pick it up. Again, it's not consistent though. It's the odd spell that you see. And then by 2007 and 8, teams can pretty consistently do it. Not every game and not on every surface, but they know, well, actually they don't, because they still think that they weight the ball and they don't. But teams understand the very basics, I think, that you need, which is one side needs to be rough and one side needs to be smooth by that point. Some wickets allow for it naturally. Other times you have to really tamper with the ball. There's always a bit of illegal shenaniganizing to get the ball into that position. But yeah, it's essentially one side is rough and one side is smooth. And then if you go back, we did a podcast with Aaron Briggs about it, and he explains it much better than I could on this show. Nadika says, Rory Smith of The Athletic recently talked about how pro soccer players smell amazing because they use cologne that the rest of us can't afford. Which begs the question, how do cricketers smell, and who's the best smelling cricketer you've ever met? That Rory Smith piece is interesting. I haven't read it, but I've talked about this before. I think that athletes smell really good because they use more cologne than anyone else. And the reason that they use more cologne than everyone else is they spend so much of their life stinking. And so I don't think it's all that different than if you know a fishmonger, right? Or if you know someone who works in sewerage or whatever. I've had friends who've had those jobs, and they usually use lots of cologne as well. There's no doubt that athletes talk about cologne more and are more interested in cologne than a regular human being would be, because they have to mask some of their scents. Kumar Dharmasena obviously has his own cologne, which is the greatest fact that has happened to modern cricket. Definitely I've noticed this. When I first started working in cricket, I was like, what? Why does everyone smell so good? And then I started talking to cricketers, and they started explaining why it was, and that. If you want, the best smelling cricketer I've ever met is Yasser Arafat. Pakistan, Surrey bowler. I'm trying to think who else he played for. Probably franchise cricket. Just incredible smells. Yasser Arafat. Pujara was someone I reckon I noticed recently who smelled really good. There's a West Indian cricketer too. Is it Darren Sammy? May not be Sammy. There's a West Indian cricketer that I remember also thinking about that. But yeah, there's a few guys that I've noticed. I've kind of tried to talk to people about this in cricket, but it's like no one really. Sometimes you're like, you're not the right person, or it's not the right time. But I think there is a thing in this in cricket as well. And Kumar Dharmasena is probably the right person to talk to. So Kumar, send me a direct message, and we can talk about your perfume, because it is something that you really do notice when I notice it less with individual players. I remember being out with a bunch of players in Sri Lanka, right? English players and Sri Lankan players. And when I went over to them, it was just obvious that they were all so heavily cologned in a way that I would never notice that with my friends. There you go. So that's why Wagon Wheel works as a podcast, right? Because what a random question. And somehow I have all this information in my head that I've never used before, right? Me and Vish should probably do an entire documentary on players and their colognes. Sinoi says, every time a young Indian batter would get made captain of their IPL team, I'd hear the same spiel in an interview. I need to bat more responsibly for the team. Would you agree that this approach set the Indian T20 team back a few years? Yeah, definitely. I've talked about it so many times, Sinoi. It's nonsense. You should be doing what makes your team most likely to win. The best way to notice this is not in batting captains, it's in bowling captains. You suddenly get guys like Heath Streak and Imran Khan like really start to take their batting seriously, because they're like, well, we have to. And it's just like, why didn't you do that before? Why did you have to be made captain to make that decision anyway? And then if you've got an attacking player, if you're Sky, I don't want Sky to be more responsible. I want Sky to be Sky. I just think we're still stuck in this old school mentality of like, no, all bowlers should be trying to get the most out of their batting, not just when they become captains. And you should do what makes your team most likely to win, not bat more responsibly. What? Why weren't you batting responsibly beforehand? Were you batting irresponsibly? Weird. It's so weird to me. PJ says, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed family time away. I did. At the time of writing, the US Powerball Lotto has rolled over to 1.1 billion. Hello. If you were to win that and take home 100% after paying no taxes for some reason, is there a realistic cricket investment that you could make where you could double your money in the next 5 years? 1.1 billion. Double my money in the next 5 years. I don't know if 1.1 billion is enough to buy Test cricket and make it private. I don't think it is. What about if I just took all the best women's players in the world? Create a league that makes sense. Test cricket league, a T20 franchise league that plays in multiple countries, but obviously with India as its main focus. I could probably swing that for 1.1, couldn't I? I think. And still have plenty of money for marketing and everything. So turn it into what women's sport should be, which is like a combination of social media, sport, marketing, juggernaut. A way that men's sport can't really do, because men's sport's always got so much media coming at it. There's always like, but you could do that and make it into a streaming league. Yeah, I think that's what you would do. 1.1 billion. yeah, I think that's probably the best play with that money in sport. I can't think of anything else. I mean, the other thing is, if you have 1.1 billion, you don't need anywhere near this much, but if you have 1.1 billion, you could basically blow out every other cricket media organization ever. Like, you know, if you had 10 million, you could basically blow them out. You don't need that much investment to make a huge impact on cricket media because it's not very good. It's not at the level it needs to be. It's not actually serving cricket fans the way that it needs to currently be doing it. So I suppose that is another option, but you don't need 1.1 billion for that. We are open to investment though. Adityan says, is the Wobble ball the legal Doosra for pacers? You have complained of having to watch Johan Botha destroy batters with his Doosra. From a vibes perspective, what makes the Wobble ball different from the Doosra? And for that matter, what about reverse swing? I think the big difference is, if you talk about Johan Botha, that Doosra for those kinds of players. So Johan Botha, who's the guy from Zimbabwe that we always obsess over at good areas? Those sorts of guys, it became a defensive thing, right? And so it means that only batters just start chipping you around. And so the cricket is not entertaining to watch. I don't think the Wobble... I think the Wobble ball has some issues with being one-dimensional. But you still get balls angling in at high pace, taking the top of off stump. And the Doosra, like, you get that from a very normal bowler, right? The Doosra, when it was bowled by Cyclical Mushtaq or by, Murali and those sorts of guys, prospects. Do you know, here's a story. Varun wasn't in the chat. He wasn't in this group. He's obviously watching this externally. I forget the name Prosper Utsaya, and he signs in to come in to put... That's how much we care about Prosper Utsaya at the Good Areas Network. No one has ever cared this much about Prosper as we do. But yeah, so I think that there's a bit of an issue with it there. Also, as you said, it wasn't legal. So there is an element of that as well. That I think is a little bit makes it a little bit more icky. Whereas Wobble ball is completely legal. In fact, you go on to talk about here reverse swing involving tampering. Exactly. It's one of these big things. Everyone's like, cricket's better with reverse swing. Okay, then you're okay with tampering with the ball, which is fine. You're allowed to be okay with it. I'm not saying you can't, but people aren't okay with tampering with the ball, right? If people actually knew how much tampering was going on with the ball, like it would really upset a lot of cricket fans, right? So if you're not okay with that, then you have to understand it. So I think there's an element of that. But again, the difference is that reverse swing is sexy in a way that a lot of the if the Doosra was like the wrong-un, which is an attacking option, I think it would have been different. But it wasn't used that way by Prosper Utsaya and Johan Botha and many other really ordinary bowlers. Syed Ajmal was fun to watch, right? There's no one who... I don't think there's any Wobble ball bowlers where I'm like, I don't want to watch them. So I think there is a big difference there. But there's no doubt that fast bowling is just sexier and more fun to watch, right? Like, that has always been the case and probably will remain the case. But spin bowling gives us something else as well. And so we make allowances sometimes for fast bowling, but I don't know if these are exactly the same positions. But also, if you allow the following on effect from what you're saying here, Adityan, is if, let's say we make the Doosra illegal for spinners, well, then spinners can bend their arms and straighten their arms, and pacers can't. So it doesn't even make sense. Like, the Doosra just wasn't an efficient ball because it wasn't able to be bowled legally when it comes down to it. I think that's just sadly the case. But it was also... it brought in a lot of spoiler bowlers. And I think if you look at some of the law changes we've seen in cricket, so one was the fielders having more than two fielders behind square leg. The reason that came in is no one wanted to watch in-swing bowlers and off-spin bowlers pitch the ball on leg stump and bowl dry down the leg side. It was fucking terrible to watch, right? And if the Doosra was all Cyclical Mushtaq and Syed Ajmal and Murali, I think it would have been a more interesting conversation. But I know for a fact that one of the conversations was, this is really pushing dull bowling that no one wants to watch. So not only is it probably chucking and against the laws of cricket, it's also dull, right? Whereas reverse swing is not dull. So I think there is an element of those two things playing a part there. Anyway, let's have a quick break. And when we come back, I'll see if there's anything in the chat room here on Wagon Wheel.
This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. If you want to be part of the community that makes content like this, head over now.
Oh, I probably need to take that off the screen, don't I? This is... where are we? Okay. Arco just asked one early on. He said, you mentioned in an Aussie spinner having a Doosra-like delivery in the 1960s. Tried to search the name, couldn't find it. Jack Potter, I believe is his name, who was a batter for Victoria. Went on to be the Oxford cricket coach, I think, for a long period of time. Jack Potter, yeah, never played for Australia. And I don't think he even had first-class wickets, did he? Oh, he did. He had 31 first-class wickets. But he bowled it in the nets. And Richie Benaud kept begging him to work on this delivery and use it more. And Jack Potter saw it as a party trick. And he would bowl. So Jack Brooks, Paul McMahon, and there's another Oxford cricketer. They would say that like late in his life, because I think, is Jack still with us? No, he's still with us. He's 87. So he was still coaching professional cricketers, or however you want to look at Oxford, but high level, first class cricketers, late into his life, and he was still bowling it apparently in the nets, his version of that, and still tricking people for a long period of time, but just never really thought of it. Northern Suburbs boy, absolute legend. I always forget his name too. There's one of the few occasions where someone's asked me his name and I remembered it. But yeah, wasn't a bowler at all. I would also think that Jack Potter's not the only one. It's a bit like the wrong-un. The wrong-un becomes a big thing when Bosanquet bowls it in the from 1895 onwards. But people were bowling leg spin before, so we know there were people bowling wrong-uns because occasionally it would come out and spin the other direction. But people just didn't know why. Right? So like with a lot of those things, it's a bit like we were talking about with reverse swing before. Reverse swing existed before we knew how to control a reverse swing. And it took us, 40 to 50 years before that spreads around global cricket. Like, that's a long time. Reverse sweep is another one that takes, 20 or 30 years? Megashwaran says, how about a quad series with ODIs with top four, bottom four, and an odd four, even ranked series? So the reason that I get asked this question once a month, why don't we have tri series anymore? Why don't we have quad series? They stopped making money. That's why we don't have them. It's very hard to make money in multiple cricket countries at the same time with something like this. And so they don't make any money and people don't really push them anymore. If people find a way to start making money with them again, they will come back. I have no doubt about that. They would come back. But yeah, as it currently stands, I don't think we're about to see them again. They were obviously really popular in that sort of early cable TV day when people didn't have, actually have a lot of cricket to watch. Now there's so much franchise cricket and everything else, they wouldn't work in the same way. But the big issue was always the same. Go back and have a look at the Sri Lanka versus New Zealand game in a quad series or a tri series when it wasn't played in one of those two countries. You couldn't get anyone in the ground and the TV ratings were dire. And eventually Channel 9, who pioneered this, were the ones who backed away from it, and eventually everyone did. That's why we don't do it. They don't make money. You could do it with the top four teams, as you said here. If the top four teams include Australia, England, and India, I just think they can make more money in other ways, if we're being honest. Maybe before a World Cup, it's a good idea. But other than that, I don't think we'd see a lot. Anurag said, Lala in his interview with Clark said some wild things, including that the salary caps in IPL can go to $50 million in 4 to 5 years. That'd mean top players getting paid $8 to $10 million a season. How realistic is that? I mean, they should be getting paid that already, Anurag. If we're being honest, with the amount of money that the players are earning their owners, they should already be on that kind of money. The big problem in India has always been the same thing, which is there's no union. If the players unionized, if the top 200 cricketers in India unionized, they would all make a lot more money. At the moment, the top players are probably already making more than $10 million a year through. That's why they have no incentive to unionize, because the top 10, 20 players are getting played under the books or getting sponsorship deals on the side or whatever that may be, however it is. They're already getting that money. My guess is that there are multiple players in the IPL getting close to that money already. Not quite 10 million a season, I wouldn't have thought. I mean, maybe Virat and Dhoni, but I wouldn't have thought there would be that many other guys who would be on those kinds of numbers. But yeah, if they unionized, what does the IPL make per year? What is 25% of that? That's not an unreasonable ask from the players. The NBA players and Cricket Australia players get what, 48 to 52% of the revenue? If you did that in the IPL, the issue is how you get there, because as I said, that there's no push to do this because there's no organized structure of the players. If the players had an organization or did that, it would change quite dramatically. But I don't know how you do it at the moment. Nicholls says, how do you see Australia's chances lessen if Cummins is ruled out, doesn't play in the whole Ashes? Australia have been spoilt by big four quicks. Drop-off is immense, untested, advantage England. A lot of that just depends on Jai Richardson. If Jai Richardson's fit, I'm not too worried. Like, it might be an issue, but he's supposed to be fit for the back half of the Ashes. And if you've got Scott Boland, Hazelwood and Stark for the front of the Ashes, and you have Jai Richardson for the back half, I don't think it's the end of the world. A lot of it also depends on Cameron Green, if he can bowl and how well he can bowl. If Cameron Green can bowl 20 overs a test match and bowl well, like averaging 30 to 35, it's not as big a drop-off again. If it's just Xavier Bartlett having to come in because Hazelwood's been ruled out, and so it's Boland, Stark, and Bartlett, then that's a bigger issue, I think. But there are plenty of ways that they can kind of cover it and move around. So I don't think they need to be as worried. And also, as you said, doesn't play the whole Ashes. That's quite a full-on injury if that was to be the case. So if you lose your best player, any team, there's no team in history, if they lost their most important player and their captain, wouldn't have some kind of impact. Like, that's going to happen to any team. That's not a specific thing with Australia. It's T20 Asia Cup time. Fun question. Which other player off the top of your head from Pakistan, Sri Lanka, or Afghanistan could you see getting into India's squad of 15? I mean, Rashid Khan would get in, wouldn't he? I mean, is he still at his peak? I'd have to go back and check his numbers. Maybe not right at the moment. He might be right there. I tell you who would be an interesting player for India. I don't know if they need him specifically with Hardik, but would be the other all-rounder that oh my God, why have I forgotten his name? The Omazai. Yeah, Omazai is a really interesting one for India. And then what? Left arm pace? You could bring in an extra left arm pacer. Nahid Rana? Oh, you didn't say Bangladesh, though, did you? Well, Nahid Rana, anyway. Yeah, so there's a couple of guys on the fringes, but India's got a pretty stacked squad. I don't think there's that many. Pakistan doesn't really have anyone that you would want at the moment. As I said, Sri Lanka, maybe some seam bowling. Walalage could be interesting, but I don't think India need him right now. But maybe in the future, Walalage could be a really important one. Afghanistan, you don't really need. I think they've got everything. Peak. Patharana. Yeah, Patharana's a very good. Yeah, if Patharana's fit, he would be in this squad. So yeah, there's a couple of guys, but yeah, there's not a lot. Yash says, is this weird to like a player who you know is not the best? Like Bhuvi Kumar is my favorite bowler, while Naeem Bumrah is so ahead. Same with Kohli and Test and versus Smith, although it's much closer. No, I think that's normal. My favorite players have never really been the best players in the world. My favorite leg spinner during the 90s was Mushtaq Ahmed. I enjoyed watching him bowl more than one. You know, Matthew Elliott, Ian Harvey, Dean Jones, these are all the cricketers that I grew up with as my favorite players. So I think that's a fairly normal thing, isn't it? I think favorite is favorite. It just means that there's something about their bowling or their batting or their cricket or their attitude or whatever. Like, you know, Dananjay De Silva, you know, Shanto, you know, these sorts of cricketers, I just really like them. I think that's a very normal thing. I always find it weird then, you know, the sort of people that just like the Australian team in the 2000s, or just like LeBron James, or just like Ronaldo, or just like Manchester United, right? And you're just like this could be, again, my neurodiversity coming up. But I always just like, really? And I get it, because there are lots of these people. But it's like, it's like people who say their favorite film is Shawshank Redemption. Really? You've watched all the films that have ever been made, and Shawshank Redemption is the one that has stuck with you. Like, of all the movies ever made, Shawshank Redemption is your favorite. It's a good movie. Don't get me wrong. There's some great elements to it, and I could see why it's enjoyable, and it's very well reviewed, and some incredible performances. But it just feels like the sort of decision that you make when you don't really have a personality. Right? Like, if it was your second favorite film, I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. But your favorite film? Your favorite football team is Manchester United? Really? You're not from Manchester? Are you sure? Again, respecting them, getting obsessed with them, all these sorts of things. But your favorite team? You don't have another football team that you like? And I could be the one in the minority. I could be the one that's wrong here. But like, it's like people who like boy bands. Like, I get it. The boy band is good, but that's your favorite musician? I met a guy recently whose favorite musician is Kylie Minogue. And I was like, do you like music? Because it just sounds like such a weird decision. Like, you enjoy Kylie, you like the way she sings, you like the way her songwriters write her songs and everything. Fine. But to be your favorite? Kylie Minogue? Shawshank Redemption? Manchester United? See, Bumrah on this list, I find different, because I think Bumrah is like Springsteen, right? Where he can be popular and also endlessly interesting at the same time, right? Whereas maybe there are other cricketers who are great, who are not as interesting as Bumrah, right? So yeah, I don't know why I decided to shit on all the people who think, like, what percentage of people who watch Western films have Shawshank Redemption as their favorite film? It's too many, isn't it? Right? If it's just too many. It's like, I watched Apocalypse Now last night. You cannot look away from a frame of that movie. Maybe the French colonial conversation at the table drags on a little bit longer than it needed to. But my God, is that film captivating in every single way. It's like an emotional trip. Compared to the Shawshank Redemption, which is a really good box office-y film, right? I don't know. So yeah, your favorite should be your favorite. And apologies to everyone who likes the Shawshank Redemption or Manchester United. I don't even know anything about Manchester United. They were just the team that came to. Lakers fans, my God. Come on now. Grow up. Ian Bishop's a Lakers fan, by the way. Come on, Bish. You're better than this. Nicholls says, Mandraker, how does he get a gig? He said Bumrah should play through injuries and become fitter, and spoke of poetic justice. Is he insane? Crazy. I don't know about any of these things. So when people ask me questions like this, the chances of me seeing them are pretty limited. I've met with Sanjay. I don't know if we've ever worked together. I mean, we were at Cricket Info at the same time. maybe we were on some videos together. I can't remember. I always thought he was fine. I think he's a person with lots of opinions. People with lots of opinions are going to rub people up the wrong way. It's kind of how the modern world works, right? I think, it probably helps him. But yeah, having met Sanjay a few times, I've got no problems with his professionalism or anything. We probably think about some things very similar and some things very, very different. But yeah, he works in cricket because he can speak quite well. He looks good on camera and has things to say. You just disagree with him. And the ones that you said there, and I'm not seeing them in context, the ones that you're putting up there. Some of them I would completely disagree with, but I disagree with many things that many people I work with. I don't always agree with myself after I've said something. That's just all part of it. But yeah, that's us done for the wagon wheel. I went a little bit longer today because, was it 2 wagon wheels I was away from? That might have been the longest I've ever been away for wagon wheels. But thank you to everyone for their support and everything. If you can go on to Patreon and help us out, it does massively. If you're watching on the YouTube though here, just clicking on the bell icon is incredibly important. We don't know what our Asia Cup plans are at the moment. In fact, just waiting to hear back. So it's not a tournament that we normally cover, but there's some sponsors who've asked us to propose some things to them. So we might be looking at something there. But yeah, it's certainly something that we might be covering this time. But if not, we've got plenty of long form content and plenty of podcast content lined up as well. So no issues there. There's a bit like Sanjay Mandraker. There's always something to say here on Good Areas.
Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pitches. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs. And Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting.